Cole didn't like coincidences. 2 unmarked letters, 2 early morning visits from strangers. And now, a threat worded just vaguely enough to provoke unease was a pattern, not a random one. He'd spent too many years reading the unsaid. In people's actions, the silence from his neighbors wasn't just awkwardness. It was hesitation, fear, or complicity. After his morning coffee, he took a quiet walk through the neighborhood. From the outside, everything looked like a postcard. Lawns clipped to regulation height, fences painted in HOA approved, off-white, even the dogs barked within acceptable decibel levels. It was all too perfect. He passed one home, 3 down from a man in a zip-up jacket, paused mid-sweep of his porch. His eyes met Cole's, then quickly darted to the rake in his hands. "Morning," the man said, but it wasn't friendly. It was rehearsed. "Morning," Cole replied, holding the gaze a second longer than most would. The man turned quickly and retreated inside. Later that day, Cole visited the HOA office listed. On the letterhead, it was a modest structure tucked behind the clubhouse. Windows shaded, blinds half-drawn. Inside, the air was stale. There was no receptionist, just a bell, and a worn binder labeled policies and procedures resting on the counter. A clipboard was perched beside it with a sign-in sheet. He signed and no one came. After a full 5 minutes, a door creaked open at the back of the room. A woman stepped out. She was in her 40s, sharp-jawed. Her nameplate read Miss Carson, Compliance Director. Her eyes landed on his chest, as if searching for a badge that wasn't there. "Can I help you?" Cole kept his voice calm. "I received a notice about my driveway. I just moved in, wanted to understand the issue." Carson blinked twice, then pulled a folder from behind the desk. She didn't open it. "Mr. Mathis, Cedar Ridge prides itself on standards. When one resident doesn't follow the guidelines, it reflects on the entire community." Cole nodded slowly. "And who decides those guidelines?" "They're voted on," she said flatly, "by board members. Duly elected. Interesting. Are those elections public?" "They are," she said, too quickly. Cole tapped the folder she held. "I'd like a copy of any formal complaint filed against my property. That's internal," she snapped, then seemed to catch herself. "Meaning, we're handling it. There's nothing further you need to worry about unless you ignore correction." He gave a slight smile. "I see." That evening, Cole pulled out the old notebook he hadn't used since leaving the force. He wrote down names. Carson, Landis, that man with the rake, the 2 in the camera footage. He paused it frame by frame, noting posture, stride, shape. He didn't need faces yet. He just needed patterns. Then, he started knocking on doors. Politely, not with a badge, with neighborly concern. Some didn't answer. Some gave excuses. But one elderly man, Mr. Holcomb, cracked his door open just enough for his eyes to show. "You're the new guy?" he asked. Cole nodded. Holcomb looked over his shoulder, then back. "You seem like you're paying attention. That's good. That's real good. But be careful." "Careful of what?" The man exhaled, voice low. "They don't like people who ask questions." He closed the door before Cole could reply. That night, as wind rustled the leaves outside, Cole reviewed the footage again. He zoomed in on the moment one of the men bent near his gas meter, not the mailbox, the meter. He paused it there, enhanced the image. Something was in his hand, not a pen. Cole's brow furrowed. His instincts had been right. They weren't just watching. They were planning something. The sun barely crept over the rooftops. The next morning when Cole stepped outside, coffee in hand, and found the new notice, pinned to his fence with a thumbtack. No envelope this time, just a printed sheet, sealed in plastic. No date, no signature. Violation number 003, inappropriate perimeter foliage maintenance. Immediate compliance required. He turned and looked at the hedge running along the side of his property. It had been trimmed just 3 days ago, sharp and even. Nothing hung over the line, nothing invasive. It was clean. Too clean. Maybe that was the problem. Cole didn't remove the notice. He just walked back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out his notebook again. He marked the 3rd violation, circled it, then drew a thin arrow connecting it to the timestamp on last night's footage. 1:16 a.m., whoever these people were. They weren't lazy. They moved late, struck fast, and left just enough evidence to seem official without offering anything you could push back against, like smoke. But he'd tracked worse before. Later that day, he stood in line at the community clubhouse post room. The air smelled of lavender, air freshener, and fresh ink. Small talk passed through the space like birds, chirping, light, polite, meaningless, until one voice caught his attention. "Best the 3rd house this month to get the perimeter warning." Someone whispered just behind him. He shifted slightly. The speaker was a woman in her 50s, holding a stack of mail and glancing nervously over her shoulder. Her eyes met his for half a second, then dropped to the floor. Cole stepped out of line and followed her as she turned down the hallway toward the exit. "Excuse me," he said evenly. She froze. "I overheard what you said about the perimeter notices." She hesitated, lips parting as if to lie. Then her shoulders dropped. "Look, I didn't mean anything. People are scared to speak up." "Why? They find things," she said. "Nails in their driveway. Sprinkler systems suddenly break. Water bills doubled. One guy had his insurance rate skyrocket because someone anonymously reported safety code issues. Have you been targeted? She bit her lip. I keep my yard perfect. My husband says don't make waves. Do you know who's behind it? She shook her head. They're not on the official board. Not really. The real decisions those happen in the late meetings, unposted, unannounced, just the same 4 or 5 faces. Names. Landis Carson. There's a younger guy. Tall, blonde, no name tag. People call him Eli, I think. And the old man with the limp, always with sunglasses on, even at night. They're the ones who started calling themselves officers. Nobody voted on that. Cole gave a polite nod. Thanks for your time. She didn't smile. Just nodded once and left without another word. That evening, Cole reviewed more camera footage. He isolated a new vehicle, an older sedan with tinted windows that had parked across from his home for nearly an hour the night before. No one exited, no one entered, but the dome light inside flickered for a moment. At 1:14 a.m., he began tracing license plates. A favor to a former colleague at the county office netted him a name. The vehicle was registered to a Thomas Grant, a neighbor. House 4 doors down. The one with the American flag flying perfectly straight. The one whose garbage cans were always perfectly aligned. Cole walked past the home just before dusk. It was quiet, too quiet, not a bird in sight. As he passed, he felt the unmistakable tickle on the back of his neck, the sense of being watched. He turned. Behind the blinds, the shape of a figure stood motionless, barely obscured, staring. Cole didn't flinch. He kept walking. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't just policy enforcement. This was strategy, pressure, something darker dressed up in paperwork, and they thought no one was watching. But Cole hadn't stopped watching since the day he arrived. Cole began rising earlier than usual, stepping outside just before sunrise, not to trim hedges or water the lawn but to watch, to study who moved, when, and how long they lingered near the same corners each morning. It wasn't paranoia, it was rhythm, and every trap had one dot at exactly 5:43 a.m. The same unmarked sedan cruised slowly past his house for the 3rd day in a row. No headlights, just parking lights faintly glowing through the fog. Cole stood still behind his front window and waited for it to pass, noting the time, angle, and plate digits. His notebook was filling up quickly now. He wasn't writing suspicions, he was tracking behaviors, names, movement patterns, timestamps. The HOA officers might have their violations, but Cole had his own system of rules. Unspoken, precise, watch long enough, and anyone who thinks they're invisible eventually leaves footprints. That afternoon, he decided to walk his dog along the backside trail of Cedar Ridge, where the properties met the nature preserve. It was quieter there, away from manicured curbs and watchful windows. The trail curved behind several houses, including one that belonged to the older man with the limp hip. The woman at the mailbox had been right. Halfway through the walk, Cole slowed his pace. A small metal sign was staked into the earth beside a fence near the tree line. It wasn't a warning or trail marker. It simply read, "Private access, authorized HOA only." There was no mention of cameras, but something in the trees felt artificial, too still. Cole crouched by a patch of brush just past the fence line and found a narrow path. Worn but not official. The grass was flattened in 2 tight, parallel lines, just wide enough for a cart or small ATV. Back home, he pulled up satellite imagery of the area. The trail behind that house wasn't marked on any community map, and it didn't lead to the main street. It curved, back toward the HOA clubhouse, or under it. He couldn't prove it yet, but something was being moved along that path. Not once, or twice routinely, and it wasn't lawn tools. That evening, a soft knock came at his front door. He opened it to find a teenager barely 18, maybe, nervous, hoodie zipped up too tight. "You the guy who just moved in?" Cole didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The kid's eyes were darting too quickly, like someone who didn't want to be seen standing still. "I work part-time, deliveries. Nothing illegal," the boy said quickly. "But some people in this neighborhood, they're making me do runs I didn't sign up for. No receipts, no tracking, cash only." Cole's expression didn't change. "They said I'd lose the job if I asked questions," but one of the boxers broke open. Once it wasn't supplies, it was records. Folders with addresses, fines, owner names, even some stuff like phone call logs, weird stuff. "Why are you telling me this?" The kid glanced behind him. "Because they're watching you harder than the rest. They think you're going to be a problem." Cole stepped forward, not threatening, just calm. "What else do you know?" The teen hesitated. "They meet in the clubhouse on Thursday nights, after hours. Doors always locked. Nobody's supposed to know, but there's a basement, and they've got files they won't let anyone see. I only know because I had to carry one down there." "Show me," Cole said. The teen paled. "I can't. Not yet. They'd know." "It was me." Cole watched him for a long moment, then nodded once. "You've already done enough." The teen turned and jogged away, vanishing down the sidewalk like he'd never been there. Cole closed the door, locked it, and returned to the footage from the night before. The lights in the clubhouse flickered on again. At 1:11 a.m., there was no event scheduled. He pressed pause on the footage. leaned back, and stared at the screen. Whatever the HOA thought they were hiding beneath their rules, it wasn't hidden anymore. Thursday arrived without incident, no new warnings, no strange vehicles, no knocks. It was too quiet, manufactured quiet. Cole knew that kind of silence well. It was the kind that usually came before a breach, before someone took a risk. By nightfall, the streets of Cedar Ridge fell into their usual rhythm. Lawn sprinklers hissed. Porch lights flicked on in synchronized order. Somewhere in the distance, a single dog barked and went silent. Cole waited in darkness. From his upstairs window, the clubhouse was half visible through the trees. Around 10:49 p.m., 3 figures entered through the side gate. No keys, no hesitation. They disappeared through the service door, the one residents weren't supposed to use. Cole didn't grab his old badge. He didn't wear his boots. Just dark clothes, soft steps, and the quiet mindset of someone who had spent a decade waiting on criminals to make mistakes. He crossed behind houses, moving through shadows like wind. The clubhouse glowed faintly from within, but only in the lower floor. The upper windows remained black. He circled the building twice, checking for movement, cameras, anything obvious. Then, crouching beside a thick hedge, he found it. A fresh dirt trail, a thin seam of disturbed earth, where grass hadn't grown back yet. It traced behind the HVAC unit and ended at a metal hatch, nearly flush with the ground. No lock, just wait. He waited, listening. No footsteps, no alarms, just faint murmurs rising through the cracks. With a slow breath, he lifted the hatch. A narrow set of wooden steps descended into what looked like an unfinished basement. Concrete walls. A single bare bulb swinging above a narrow hallway. He took each step carefully. Soft soles, pressing the boards. The murmur grew clearer, voices behind a door. Low and serious. Not angry, not shouting. Just controlled. Cole didn't approach the door. He stepped into the side passage instead, where rows of metal filing cabinets lined the walls. Each drawer had a label. Violation score tandem. Opened one drawer marked incident and pulled out the top file. Inside were photos, most black and white, printed on grainy paper. Homes, vehicles, people. Red ink, circled specific items, license plates, garden flags, security cameras. On one photo, the words non-compliant test case were scribbled. Another file read, J. Bennett, resigned under pressure. Removed 3/14. Cole knew that name. A woman he had passed twice on his morning walks. One day she was walking her dog. Next day she was gone. No moving van, no sale sign. He kept moving. The hallway twisted deeper, until he reached a locked steel door. Behind it, the voices grew louder. He could hear Landis now, recognizable. That stiff, measured way he spoke. We tighten pressure on the outliers. No action yet, but he's watching. We escalate, he'll push back. He's the kind we have to make disappear slowly. A pause. Another voice. Lower. You sure he doesn't suspect the secondary group? No, not yet. And if he does, we'll activate the recall policy. Quietly. Cole backed away from the door. He'd heard enough. He didn't know what recall policy meant yet, but it wasn't something they wanted in daylight. As he turned to retrace his steps, a motion sensor clicked behind him. He froze. A soft humming noise started, then a red light blinked near the far wall. Silent alarm. He didn't run. He moved with purpose, retracing steps through the hatch, gently closing it behind him. He didn't go straight home. He circled the street twice, then entered his property through the back. Only then did he allow himself to sit. They hadn't just created rules. They'd created something more, in operation with levels, steps, and targets. And now they knew someone had gotten too close. The next move wouldn't be quiet, and Cole would be ready for it. The morning after his descent into the clubhouse basement, Cole's driveway was spotless. No warning notices, no mysterious cars. Even the air felt heavier, like the calm, after a decision had been made. They hadn't reacted publicly, and that alone was proof they knew he had seen something. That afternoon, a neighborhood truck rolled up to his curb, bright red HOA seal on the door. A man in sunglasses and a collared polo stepped out. He wasn't the usual type, too broad in the shoulders, too upright. He carried a clipboard but didn't look down once. You, Mr. Mathis? The man asked. Cole didn't answer at first. He glanced past the man to the truck. No visible plates. Depends who's asking. I'm here for a perimeter reassessment. Routine sweep, HOA ordinance refresh. Should take less than 10 minutes. Cole narrowed his eyes. You with compliance? The man smiled. We all work for the same purpose, sir. Cole didn't nod. He just stepped aside and let him pass. The man walked the line of Cole's property without pulling out a tape measure or taking photos. He didn't examine anything, just circled like a hawk, pretending not to watch a mouse. Cole watched him from the porch the entire time. As the man returned to his truck, he paused. We like order here, Mr. Mathis. That's what makes Cedar Ridge different. Hope you've noticed. Cole didn't respond, but he made a mental note. Right before the man stepped into the truck, he slid something into the mailbox with his left hand. It wasn't a letter. 10 minutes later, after the truck was gone, Cole opened the box. Inside was a small metal strip wrapped in paper. Taped around it were 5 typed words. You're not invisible, Sheriff. The title chilled more than the threat. No one had addressed him as sheriff in weeks. Not here. Not openly. The gloves were off. That night Cole made a call. Not to the local police, they had ties to Cedar Ridge. He knew at least one HOA officer served on the county development board, another in zoning enforcement. Instead, he contacted an old friend in state-level internal affairs. "Tell me what you know about Cedar Ridge HOA," he asked. The man sighed through the line. "Why? I think they're hiding something under the name of property management." Silence. Then, "You're not the first to say that, but we never had a witness who knew how to dig, until now." Cole gave him everything. Every note, every timestamp, every file name and corridor map. He sent no photos, just handwritten transcriptions. He wanted to see who leaked what and how. Fast. By sunrise the next day, two things happened. First, a maintenance crew showed up outside his house unannounced. 3 workers in reflective vests began marking lines along his water meter. They claimed it was a system upgrade. Cole knew better. Second, a message appeared in chalk on the sidewalk near his gate, barely visible. Meant to be washed away by morning sprinklers. "We gave you a chance to fit in." Cole took a photo, erased it, and went inside. They weren't interested in fitting in. They were interested in control, and now that someone was pushing back, they were shifting to something else entirely: containment. But Cole was already 2 steps ahead. That evening, he drove out of town, took back roads, and stopped at a storage unit an hour from Cedar Ridge. Inside were 3 boxes, 1 lockbox, and a flash drive. He'd kept it sealed for years, but now it was time. On that drive home, he knew the next move wouldn't be quiet from either side, because while they were busy drawing lines, Cole had already started digging under theirs. Friday morning began with birdsong, soft and cheerful, as if Cedar Ridge was trying to convince itself that nothing had changed. The same neighbors waved, the same dogs barked, but Cole noticed the change not in their voices, but in their eyes. Some looked longer than before. Some avoided his gaze altogether. The message was out. The HOA's inner circle had flipped the switch. They were testing him now, not just with threats or surveillance, but by shaping the community around him, one silent neighbor at a time. Cole spent the morning scanning the documents he'd retrieved from storage. They weren't related to the HOA directly, but they were records of past cases, rackets disguised as committees, civic leadership groups that funneled fines into private trust accounts, cases the public never heard about because the truth settled out quietly, in favor of the silent ones. Cole had always wondered what had happened to those models. Now he realized they'd evolved. Around 2 p.m., Cole received an unmarked envelope slipped beneath his garage door. Inside was a printed invitation. Mandatory compliance, mediation, Cedar Ridge Clubhouse. Room B, Saturday, 11 a.m., no sender listed, no explanation. But the wording was intentional. Mandatory implied authority. Mediation implied he was already at fault. Cole circled the time and folded the letter slowly. That night, he returned to the trail behind the clubhouse, this time, not to sneak in, but to leave something behind. Just beneath the hatch he'd discovered earlier, he left a small black pouch wrapped in duct tape. Inside, a dummy phone with a single app installed, a decoy tracker. If they found it, they'd think he was logging entry times. They'd focus on the wrong trail. At midnight, movement stirred again on his street. Cole stayed hidden in the shadows of his back porch. A black SUV pulled into the cul-de-sac, lights off. 2 men stepped out, same ones from the perimeter reassessment earlier that week. This time they weren't pretending. They crossed his yard slowly, careful not to trip. Motion lights. Cole let them get within 5 feet of his shed before he triggered the spotlight. Both men froze. One reached for his belt too quickly. Cole stepped out from the side of the house. Flashlight in one hand, phone recording in the other. "Evening," he said. "Lost something." The taller one blinked against the light. "Just checking for wildlife reports." "Neighborhood patrol." Cole nodded toward the street. Unmarked vehicle, no patrol vest, no notice filed. Neither answered. "Next time you come onto my property uninvited," Cole said quietly, "bring a warrant, or someone with a badge." They turned without a word, not a threat, not a denial, just silence. By the time they pulled away, Cole had what he needed: face captures, timestamps, and behavior logs. He passed them all to internal affairs. Later that night, the teen delivery driver returned. He came to the side fence this time, hood low. "I only have a minute," he said. "They're burning files. Some of the ones you found are already gone, but I saw something else there, making a list." Cole's voice was steady. "What kind of list?" "Not violations. People, residents, marked with letters. P for potential, T for threat. You're circled in red." Cole didn't react, and the others. The teen hesitated. "One lady 2 doors down disappeared last week. They said she moved. I saw her mailbox open this morning. Letters piling up. No one's picked them up." Cole took a breath. "They're moving faster now. Should I leave?" the teen asked. Cole looked at him. "No, but stop delivering. Don't come near the clubhouse again." The teen nodded and vanished back into the night. Cole stood there alone, hands in his pockets, watching the porch lights flicker across the street. He knew what came next. They'd tried fear, they'd tried warning. Now, they would try force. And they wouldn't know he'd been preparing for that from the start. Saturday arrived cloudy, with the wind just sharp enough to feel like warning. Cole stood in front of his mirror, straightening his shirt knot, his uniform, not something imposing. Just plain clothes that didn't carry a title. That would bother them more. They didn't want a neighbor. They wanted someone they could label. By 10:45 a.m., he was already parked outside the Cedar Ridge clubhouse, 2 rows back. He watched the others arrive. None of them looked at each other. Every man wore the same type of button-up, all tucked in too neatly. Even their shoes matched brown leather, polished like they never touched dust. At 10:58, Landis himself stepped out of the side entrance and waved Cole inside. "We appreciate your cooperation," he said. His voice was softer this time, polite. Dangerous. Cole walked in without a word. The meeting room was colder than expected. Artificial lights, no windows. A single table sat in the center, with 3 chairs on one side and one alone on the other. They wanted theater. Cole sat. Across from him, Landis, the broad-shouldered man from the perimeter check, and a new FISA woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a file thicker than a phone book. "We'll keep this brief," she said without introduction. "You've been notified of several concerns regarding your integration with the community, specifically, repeated contact with non-authorized personnel, activity during restricted hours, and conduct that suggests intent to disrupt operational flow." Cole leaned back. Big words for lawn complaints. The woman didn't blink. "You've also been recorded within restricted access zones. That alone is a breach of Article 21, Landis added. "We typically offer mediation before escalation, Mr. Mathis, but it's important you understand Cedar Ridge is built on participation, mutual respect. Without it, a community can collapse." Cole let the silence stretch, then placed a small USB stick on the table. "I brought something to him, just for context." The tall man leaned forward, reaching for it, but Cole placed his hand on top. "Before you grab that, you should know it's been duplicated, already sent off and backed up out of state." The woman's fingers curled slightly on her folder. "Contains voice logs from your basement meeting 2 nights ago," Cole continued calmly. "Lists of residents tagged for surveillance. At least 2 marked as threats. 1 marked for removal. Also photos of your file drawers. Interesting labeling system, especially test cases." Landis's tone shifted. "We take privacy seriously here. Any breach of internal property is a direct violation. So is coercion." Cole cut in. "So is unauthorized data collection. So is operating a private registry of residents." That one caught the attention of a few friends of mine in the AG's office. The woman stood slowly, closing the folder. Her voice cooled. "You've made your position clear." "I haven't even started," Cole replied. "This ends 2 ways. Either the internal system shuts down and is handed over voluntarily, or the people outside this HOA's bubble start hearing about what's really happening behind your committee." Landis laughed once, short. "You think the community will side with you?" Cole stood. "They won't have to. They'll just have to listen." Without another word, he left outside. Clouds had begun to gather above the manicured streets of Cedar Ridge. A slow shift, barely noticeable, but Cole felt it. That night, 3 houses on his street turned off their porch lights early. One of them belonged to a man who hadn't spoken to Cole since the welcome meeting, but now gave him a nod through the window. He wasn't alone anymore. Inside, Cole reviewed the footage again this time, of the men at his shed. He zoomed in on one badge-shaped item clipped beneath the man's belt. Not HOA issue. Private, security contracted. They were preparing something bigger than intimidation. But they'd miscalculated one thing. Cole had never been playing defense. Sunday morning came still and gray. No birdsong this time, just the creak of trees and the faint, distant groan of a gate swinging closed to slowly. Cole sipped black coffee from his porch while reviewing one final file, the only one he hadn't turned over yet. It was marked with a date from 6 years earlier. It wasn't HOA related on the surface. It was tied to a development board scandal in a different county. Fraud, land zoning, forced relocation. The woman from the mediation room, her name was buried in the last few pages, next to an approved permit issued under emergency exemption. Same signature, same style. Cole slipped the file into an envelope and walked to his truck. The HOA didn't know he'd never truly left law enforcement, not completely. His badge had been hung up, but his clearance hadn't been revoked. And, more importantly, his connections hadn't faded. He met the internal affairs investigator 30 minutes outside town. They exchanged no words, just paperwork and nods. Then Cole returned. Knowing exactly how this would end. By Monday, Cedar Ridge woke up to 3 absences. Landis was gone. His car didn't move all day. His mailbox overflowed. The tall man from the mediation disappeared too. His house went dark. A moving truck showed up before sunrise, but no one saw him carry anything out. And the woman, she never lived in Cedar Ridge at all. Records showed she was never a resident, just a name on a file. Connected to a regional corporate housing firm that had been dissolved 3 years ago. On Tuesday morning, the clubhouse posted a notice. Board restructuring underway, all regular HOA activities suspended until further notice. Cole waited. He knew the cover-up wasn't over yet, but it had begun to fray. At dusk, two neighbors approached him, first time anyone had dared to speak openly. "You were right," one said, "about the notes. They tried to push me out last year. Said I owed for repainting a fence I never owned. Big T, fined me for keeping a hose coiled the wrong way," the other added. Turns out that wasn't a rule. They made it up. More came throughout the week. Quiet talks on porches, exchanged nods, silent acknowledgments. The system that ruled them had been more fragile than anyone realized. Inside the clubhouse, the files Cole had reported were locked behind an investigation seal, but not before the teen courier slipped out one more copy of the violation roster, the full one, with circled names. A few residents were listed as neutralized. One was redacted entirely, but Cole had already made his own copy. Stored, backed up, protected by Friday. A county news outlet picked up whispers of the story. They didn't name the HOA, but they hinted at a suburban experiment in authority gone too far. The article ran for 6 hours before being removed from the site. Didn't matter. The cracks were showing, and Cedar Ridge was starting to wake up. That night, Cole stepped into his backyard and stood beneath the open sky. No fences tall enough, no cameras blinking, just the breeze, finally clean. He'd never wanted power, he just wanted space. But when people pretended power was theirs to abuse, and expected no one to look deeper, that was always their first mistake. Because sometimes the quiet house on the end of the street didn't just belong to a neighbor. Sometimes it belonged to a man who had spent 20 years watching people like them try to play sheriff and lose.